What I want to do now, we're going to do two fairly quick, more business things, and then we'll go into that final session that we talked about. We're taking advantage of having Richard Ying here, even though he's not really desktop publishing. We know he's sort of an outlier, but hopefully he won't outlie the rest of us on these kind of discussions.
Bad
Richard,
pun.
I know that you were locked in the back room. You told me that very carefully, that your brother and Drain.
Doug Drain, yes.
Tell us about how the company started and how it began.
Yeah, so yesterday I mentioned that Atex is sort of, well, if this is the history of desktop publishing, we're the prehistory. That's at the business starting up, the technology, the customer base we covered, but the business is also a little bit prehistory. When we started the Atex, the three of us got together and we decided, to do something. We did have a bit of background with Hendrix Electronics in publishing, but that was really just to get text into the computer. There wasn't, we didn't know anything about fonts, what's it, getting ink onto paper, bleeding, and all the other stuff. Halftones, color, none of that stuff. With the US News and World Report, we got not just a customer, but we got Jonathan's dad. John came and basically taught my brother and me about printing, publishing. John was wonderful. I had this regular back problem. So every now and then I will be flat out for 3 days. One day he came to visit, I was flat out. So he came to visit me at home. At that time, I was living in a house that was 40 feet above ground level on a big rock. The only thing that I can afford was a shack because half of that was collapsed. And we worked with me on my back, couldn't even get up to go to the bathroom. He was dead. We were talking about printing, publishing, and all of those things. So that was the kind of guy John was. But more importantly, that was also the kind of way we start a company back then. Our starting capital for Atex was $300 per person. That is because that was the limit of our credit card, right? We each decided that we would put in our entire credit card, charge everything on it until we run out. And that's what we did. When we signed a contract with US News and World Report, Doug asked for 1/3 down payment. And they said, why do we need to pay you down payment? So, well, otherwise you're not going to get, we can't buy your computer to build your things for you. And they said, we don't know that you have anything. No, it's okay. We will put your name on the computer. It's yours, right? We buy it in your name. So if it doesn't work, you have the computer. So that was Doug's brilliance. We got our 1/3 down payment, and we used that as a template for all future sales. US News paid that. And also every time we sign a new contract, we build a new computer. We have remember those 19-inch racks? Well, the top of it has space. We put the magazine or newspaper's logo on it, including Minneapolis Star and Tribune. 1/3 paid for the cost of the product.
What kind of computers were you getting then?
PDP 11, but we had to buy a lot of other parts to it. So those were in those days, 64 kilo words, so 128 kilobytes worth of memory, running at sub-megahertz, which by the latter part of the 70s actually broke 1 megahertz. We were very happy about that. But each one of those computers would have to, we can't afford one computer per monitor. So was driving 16 terminals Oh, incidentally, wire service has to go in, and you have to send telex out. You have to manage, AP wires coming in, UPS, and all those things. Oh, by the way, there's paper tape reader you have to keep track of too, because every now and then stories came in paper tape. Okay. Details. And then later on, Doug said we can't afford to sell those expensive terminals. We need a lower end product. And so we need to support more terminals. So he called those reporter terminals. Same terminals, just lower price. But that means I have to put more terminals in the poor PDP-11. And my brother said, being hardware, no problem, I'll give you an extra bit on the terminal number. That was easy, right? So software, well, you have to run with the same bandwidth that you have and all that. So what do you cut out and how do you squeeze everything in? But we managed. And then, of course, H&J speed had to, everybody hits to justify. So we make it manual H&J. You have to hit it before you will. When you write the story, you actually don't care. It's only later on. So make it manual. And then what do we do? Oh, yeah. We have to speed up H&J. Why do we need to speed up H&J? Well, it doesn't look good. Well, I can't speed up H&J because the PDP-11, like you guys know, there's no multiply. You can't multiply, divide. It's all addition. You can't even do subtraction, right? You have to complement and then add. So doing multiplication is, if you multiply by 7, you add it 7 times. If you want to multiply 77, you multiply 7 times, shift it again, add 10 times, 7 times again. So my brother said, no problem, I'll build you a multiplier hardware. But we can't charge for it. You can't say that, customer, we sell you a
Was this the 11,
PDP-11.
not the PDP-8?
No, 11.
PDP-11
I
can
refuse to go on the 8.
PDP-11 can subtract, for sure.
Complement. It had to subtract. Oh, it was the 8 that didn't have the.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, 8 didn't even have the real add, right? It was a tad. 2's complement add. You have to figure out the shifts before you actually do the add, because then you lose the
I
carry.
thought it could multiply, though. I thought the 11 could multiply.
No, not the what we had.
The lowest
Maybe there was
model.
some really
Later
feeble
on.
11 that couldn't.
I think the lowest model couldn't.
Yeah.
lowest
Later
model
on, they had the VAX that had
Oh,
everything.
no.
No, we used it in Sutherland. We used PDP-11s, but they were higher class PDP-11s.
Yeah.
There were several different models.
Yeah.
So we had the custom-built multiplying, hardware multiplier, but we can't. It's an extra card. It costs money. Sure. So Doug said, that's not a multiplier. Why do you call it a multiplier? It's called fast H&J. So we were selling fast H&J for $1,000. So that's how we got the business going, totally bootstrap. I was looking at your picture. The first picture you have the Newsday newsroom. You can see those terminals here. Yesterday, did I mention about the cardboard box?
Yes.
Yeah. So you notice that this looks like a cardboard box. What? For good reason, because I didn't want the customer to think that we had actually built a new terminal on them that looks different than the cardboard box. So it looked like a cardboard box. There's another reason why it looks like a cardboard box, in that you notice a seam around the edge, so that we can save money making the mold, the top and the bottom of the mold, same. Make the mold, you slap them together, and you save money on the mold.
So how much money are we talking about that you got from U.S. News and World Report?
I think the first order was about $150,000. We got $50,000 down payment. We actually rented an office afterwards with that. And then Doug had a completion payment. So we shipped shipment payment of a third. So when we were ready to ship, they came up here, accepted the product, and then we ship it, we got another third. After we ship it, when they start production, we get half of the remaining third payment. And then there's another 15% ballpark left over for customer satisfaction. I keep saying to Doug, why do you have customer satisfaction? I mean, they never pay us. He said, shh, we don't want them to pay us. What do you mean you don't want them to pay us? There's money in there. There is an accounting method called completed contracts method. As long as, the contract is not completed. It has to be customized. Everything has to be custom. As long as it is not a completed contract, and I think Boeing pushed for that long ago, it is not taxable revenue, right? In which case the profit doesn't get recognized. And if the customer doesn't pay us for 1 year, you don't have to recognize that. And if your sales goes up, it can be such that you never pay taxes. So 10 years later, when we sold the company, there was accrued tax of $20 million on the books. And that was the primary source of our investment. U.S. News and World Report actually had to pony up another $100,000 because all three of us weren't getting paid, my brother, I, and Doug, for about a year plus. And then we, run short employees. I said, don't pay the programmers. They don't eat anything. You don't have to pay them. That wasn't quite the way it was done. You couldn't do that. But then what do I know? So U.S. News and World Report actually invested $100,000 in the company, and that was the sum total of all the investment we had received.
How much of an ownership did you give them for their investment?
I believe it was 10%, which at the time we thought, wow, they were wonderful.
Did you deliver multiple systems to U.S. News and World Report?
U.S. News and Report started out with a production system. They had 4 terminals that their production department used to, instead of punching paper tape, they used our system for that initially. When we shipped, it was what today would be called 0.8 version. We were updating software, before we delivered, I was at the U.S. News, before the first live production, I was at their shop for about 6 weeks on a 24-hour shift. We had, can't be 24 hours, we had 2 hours between Mike McDonald, their production manager, and I. We had 4 hours on the ladies' restroom. There was a couch in there. Between midnight, or is it 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., we each got 2 hours on the couch. So for the 4-6 weeks we were there, that's how we ran the...
Did you have any other clients at that point in time?
No, we didn't. They were the only customer. We got that thing up and going, and then we started selling to other customers.
When was your next customer?
It was Newsweek. We got all of the magazines and then newspapers.
Your cash flow, once you got past that beginning, your cash flow was pretty good.
Right. They were. I think that Doug was talking to a lot of people.
Yeah, he was.
And then, but they were all waiting to see whether we can deliver.
How many people did you have working for you by the second year or third year?
Second year, we grew pretty rapidly. I think that when we delivered the first system, we had about 5-7 people.
A year later, 2 years later?
2 years later, maybe 20, 30 people. But then things started growing rapidly when we had a sales staff, developing programmer staff. We were taking kids out of school classmates of ours.
Where were you located?
For the first year, maybe even 2 years, we had a one-room office in Lexington. We picked that office because we noticed the trapdoor leading up to the attic that was open, and found out our office was like about 120 square feet. So that was the headquarters. All the programmers ended up in the attic with a trapdoor with the fold-out ladder. So it is important with the fold-out ladder because when the customers come, you want to fold it out.
That's wonderful.
And then the attic was not insulated, so it was a little hot in the summer and cold in the winter. Cold in the winter was fine because the computer, don't mind that. It was hot in the summer that we had a problem with. So the business has changed. How we start a business today versus back then. So this is maybe a good.
So how long did Atex exist as a separate company?
We sold to Eastman Kodak in 1980. At the time, I think I mentioned we had 1,000 people. And it was, by that time, even maybe a year before that, I realized that, I think it was Chuck or John, you guys mentioned that always hire somebody better than yourself. We always knew that. It was easy for me personally because not only is it easier to hire up because the population is higher, for me it was almost a necessity. There's nobody down below. Anyway, come the latter part of the 70s, we started putting in professional management. Had a personnel department, and the head of personnel says, Richard, you can't have everybody call a programmer. I said, no, we have a junior programmer. He was a junior in college, and then when he went to the next year, he was the senior programmer. So I realized that I have no idea how to run a company. I had no idea how to run a company, and we needed help. At the time, Eastman Kodak was at its prime. They were in the graphic art industry. They knew all about our customers. So we thought that would be a good way for us to learn from them. And they also wanted to learn from us about the computer systems business. We were at their research lab. The head of research, who eventually became their CEO, and I can't remember his name, showed us the camera, digital camera. They said it was a 4,000-bit in one row, linear, and you run it down the plate to make the scan. So they said, well, we expect we have about a 15-year window. We have to transition the company in 15 years to get out of film. So he was, he actually was conservative because the film business didn't start to go away until 2000, all right? The first 2 megapixel.
When you say you sold the company, did you stay with it after it was sold?
Not really. They put in a new president. I think that it got what I thought that I'll learn from them wasn't what I really wanted to learn. It's a process, right? The big company was, they have a lot of middle management, depth of management, big bench. Somebody on top won't come to Bedford. Somebody who has a prospect to go up to the top won't come to Bedford. It is the guys in the middle that has no chance to go up, came up.
So when you make this sale, what did they pay for the company?
I believe it was about 70 million.
7-0.
7-0. We had a revenue stream about 50 to 70 million at the time. We were running about 65% gross margin.
Sounds like you sold for a very low price then.
At the time, we thought it was great, but using 80s standard, it was already low. Of course, then 90s and the bubble came, that was ridiculous, low. But
How long did you and Doug and your brother stay with the company after it was sold?
none of us stayed very long.
We talking months, years?
I don't know. I think that in title, we were there for a little bit. Do you remember the?
Well, Charles stayed on and consulted for probably a year or so
Yeah.
and did get access to, and he took me up to Rochester once and we met with the,
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was an experience.
Charles was more involved in it. I felt that my best buy date was long past. Hiring people better than yourself, well, I think that I done good. Paul, and quite a few others. Oh, and I have to thank you guys, John, Chuck, looked after Paul, and my nephew, Auditude. You guys bought his company about 4 or 5 years ago.
Which one?
Auditude.
How do you spell it?
AUDITUDE.
Probably.
Look it up.
It's only 9 figures, so of course it's a round off area. It doesn't even go up to the board. So it's good to see the next generation and the next generation all doing better and better than.
That's a wonderful story, but it's a totally impossible story. It's ridiculous. You have no business succeeding. You know, you just fundamentally, it just shouldn't have happened, right?
Oh, it should never have happened.
And it did.
But that's what
thanks
life is. Yeah, as a life form, we should not have.
to you. Okay, limited time. Go ahead, Chuck.
I was curious, which were the first typesetter that you actually drove with the Atex system?
Is it? I believe was it the U.S. News is a triple I.
It's triple I, 820, something like that.
It was a digital typesetter.
It was a digital CRT typesetter, that was a full-face typesetter.
And did you drive it with
Full page.
electronically? You had an electronic interface, not
There-
paper tape?
There was an electronic.
Well, the typesetter, the output device wasn't there. It was in Chicago, Chicago.
Oh, that's right. There was an output device in Chicago that was connected by a 1200 baud modem. There was a local CompuGraphic with a spinning disc. What is that model called? It's
I
a
forgot what it was, yeah.
yeah. It's got 4 film strips, 4 fonts with a on a drum. So we have to simulate. The drums have no. The fonts don't correspond. So we have to fake it to get the drum to step back if it is too wide and stretch out because it is only for proofing. So we have to lie to the CompuGraphic about the font information that would come out finally on the triple I. It was fun.
The triple I at R.R. Donnelly, or where was it?
Donnelly.
All right, okay. What happened later was that, of course, they moved to everybody in the building having their own video terminals, everything being written on the video terminals, doing pages by 75, sending those out with hold for the graphics. And then by 77, they had a triple I scanner for all the halftones. So they were scanning the halftones, dropping the halftones in place, and transmitting directly, in that case, to multiple locations, because it was printed in 3 different locations. So there are multiple output devices, and would be sent to all 3 of them at, of course, much higher speeds.
On this, because otherwise I'll get to text.
I always think it's interesting to look at source documents from the actual time, and I happened to have an article that was written by John Siebold in February 1981, and I wanted to read a sentence at the end of it. He said, okay, by the way, the title of his article is Document Preparation Systems and Commercial Typesetting. So this was before the term desktop publishing. Okay, so then it says, these systems developed for commercial use may also prove to be viable in a scholarly setting Such an example is offered by the adoption by the Supreme Court of the United States of an Atex copy processing system.
Yeah, we sold products to all three branches of the government, including three-lettered agencies. At the time, I don't think I was even a U.S. citizen, but I had to go to Langley to install system, and so they escorted me in and escorted me out. But I guess that those were more innocent.
That was standard practice for everybody.
Yeah.
We always got escorted.
Thank you very much, Richard. That's a fun story. We have a little bit of time. Donald, you asked to talk a little bit about the business side of TeX.
Yeah, I've never been very good at understanding money, but during the time I did the development at Stanford, we did have to pay for some of the things, and so I could say just a few words about that. So originally, okay, so scientists have something called the National Science Foundation, and somehow, other people say we ought to support scientists, and so we get to live. We don't have to. Well, we do have to ask for grants, okay, and renewals of grants, but it isn't the same as starting a business by any means. But I had regular contacts from the National Science Foundation and also from Office of Naval Research to work on algorithms, and then I had also a little bit of money from that IBM was paying to support research. The IBM money was more like $20,000 a year or something like this, but it was unrestricted. So while the other funds I had to tell what I was spending it for. So I was supposedly doing research on algorithms, but of course I'm really spending an awful lot of time writing software for TeX. So I wrote a few papers, and then at the end of the report to National Science Foundation, I said, and by the way, in order to prepare these papers, I have some software that was used to do the formatting. So I was able to keep this up and get enough money to pay for graduate student assistants, the people who were helping with me. We had a private donor who gave a few $100,000 to help me bring Chuck Bigelow to Stanford, to supplement the salary, because it wasn't coming from Stanford's endowment. It wasn't an official billet to have typography. And then after a while, I got a very interesting message from the National Science Foundation. Said, Don, this project is actually doing very well, but we think that maybe National Science Foundation isn't. Let me introduce you to a man. I forget what his name, Jones or something. Anyway, from the System Development Foundation, and so Charles Smith, I guess that was his name. And so he had been given the responsibility for figuring out what to do with the money that was left over from the system from the system development, the work actually for the missile shield at the end of the 50s, and so on. And so all of the remaining money had been given to this foundation in order to do good things with. And he had given like $1 million to Stanford Music Department. And so he also gave $1 million to the Stanford. He came to talk to me and said, "What do you need in order to finish this project well?" And I said, "Well, I gave him a few things." And he said, "No, you got to ask for more." And so he gave me. So I had, at the end of the project, I did have this this money that was able to bring in distinguished visitors, and we had about a dozen graduate students who all I think contributed to the field of desktop publishing later on. Let's see, the other thing I wanted to mention. Well, this was mostly a volunteer organization, of course, and but okay.
Well,
Maybe it'll come to me.
Let me ask you a question on the
Yeah.
thing. In all the people who ended up using it, doing their own variations and so forth of text, did any of them ever contribute money or pay anything to the university or to you for the use of that product?
Okay, so, yeah, I guess I ought to mention this, that I was very adamant that I wanted this to be in the public domain because I didn't have any particular state in it, and I thought there was a big need among the mathematical community. I was very happy that I was not competing with the newspapers and trying to write a system that was going to cause a lot of competition and other worries. But I mostly wanted to serve this underserved community, and so I was. So I specifically told Stanford I was not going to apply for any intellectual property. Stanford was interested in licensing things, and I said no. This is going into the public domain, and I said otherwise I quit. So
You mentioned that yesterday, but I was taking the next step. Did anybody ever sell things using the text capability to the scientific market, to anybody else, and do it as a business proposition?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. First of all, I was very disappointed that I thought I wasn't competing with anybody at first and making anybody unhappy, but it turned out that a man who had been the American Math Society had been using his services, and so I got a letter from him saying, and I think he also wrote to his congressman and so on. He says, "Why are the U.S. taxpayers paying Professor Knuth to put me out of business?" Because he had, because his system was nowhere near as good as TeX, but the fact that I had introduced TeX, I didn't think I was hurting anybody, but in fact, I did destroy his own business. So this made me unhappy. I showed it to the various the NSF people and so on, and they said, "Well, that's nothing to worry about." But now many other people did and still do get their main income because of TeX. Because not only consulting services, but many companies do a lot of publishing around the world, and it's because of their expertise in TeX, and they use TeX internally, and especially I mentioned yesterday Eastern Europe. I mean, they're in the Czech Republic, there are many books and encyclopedias that were produced with TeX, and so.
To your knowledge, is anyone selling it as a software product?
Yeah, so there was PC TeX, and PC TeX came out about 1986, about this time, and Lance Carnes, who had and David Fuchs before he went to work for FrameMaker, he had developed also and sold a version of TeX for the IBM PC. It was called Personal TeX, I think, or something like. Anyway, and we premiered. He demoed that, and I think that was 1986, in the spring of 1986. So it was very contemporary with the other things that Lee was mentioning. And so Lance Carnes made a good business out of PC TeX. I had a client base for and newsletter and user group meetings that I knew about. There was another company in Beaverton, Oregon, that made TeX for the Macintosh, and that came out about 87, 88. TeX was considered, of course, to be a what do you call it? The specialist for mathematicians. But there are a bunch of mathematicians, and in fact, mathematicians seem to have found that it was what they needed, so.
It's not just mathematicians who are using that notation. It's also anybody who's doing scientific work, physicists, a whole range of engineers, a whole
Well,
range of people.
about 10% of chemists and about, I don't know, it used to be about 5% of biologists, but now there's a lot more mathematical biology going on. So I'm getting up. Okay.
Does Bob Sedgwick use it for his books?
What?
Bob Sedgwick use it for his books at Princeton? Computer science?
Well, actually, I think, no, that's right. I think he might have done it all in raw PostScript. I know his last book he used InDesign, but he fought with it every day, every step of the way. I mean, he's on your board, but he said he was having trouble because of the way InDesign was really not designed for this kind of book, and so every time he made one change, he would have to go change a whole bunch of other files and so on. But because of the, I mean, he has no limit on what he wants to put into a book.
Yeah. Dave Walden?
There are a number of companies that sell versions of things built on tech, packaged in a way that meets some market. And in fact, PC Tech, Lance Carnes, I believe is still in business today. So another point I'd like to make about tech, because it came up in another discussion, is about user groups. Since '81, I think there was a user group for tech, and the early years were all about getting it on different computers, taking advantage of the fact that it was portable. My last point is that while I'm sure it's a small percentage, people in the humanities use tech all the time. For instance, if you're doing a critical edition, you want to have one page with one set of footnotes, a second page which is pointing into the first page. Those kind of people are using tech and come to the users group meetings.
Interesting. So it's a business you didn't make, but other people have made businesses out of it to some extent. But you've contributed so much to such a wide range of people worldwide, haven't you?
As I said, it was something that I didn't need because I had already reached my main goals, but I could see that people were being held back by not having such a thing. But I had absolutely no idea of trying to compete in this way, but more I wanted to help the people that needed, that were willing to put the extra mile in themselves in order to get some quality.
Wonderful.